Good afternoon. Uh, First of all, forgive me for my English, but I hope you will understand me, I will understand you. And my plan is to tell you a story, a fascinating story of the Melnikov House, which is an architecture masterpiece. And as Jenny said, it is last 5 years. It's only young. It's only emerging museum. The house is old. It's more than 90 years old, but museum is young. So we start this process of museumification with this very simple idea that it's architecture masterpiece. But the more we work with archive, with collections, with documents, the more we understand that it's much more complicated. Architecture is just a starting point, but it's not a final destination. It's a house museum. It's a historic house. There is a story of the house, of architect, of his family, of our country, of our world in the 20th century. So I want to share with you today some observations and some of our discoveries. So this is how this house looks like now from the streets, from a street right in the downtown of Moscow, maybe a mile from a Kremlin. And this is how it looked like 90 years ago, just after construction. So probably from video you got the idea that it's now surrounded by rather high new building. So it's like in a stone back in a stone jungle. Urban landscape changed a lot for 90 years. And, but if you pay attention to this high building on the left, it was before the Melnikov House. And actually, the house was built after revolution, 10 years after Russian Revolution in 1927, on the place of never built sister building, because that one before First World War, very successful developers project, and they planned to build sister building, second one. They got all permissions from the city. They managed to demolish some structure that was between two firewalls, between two brandmauers, but it never happened because of the war, First World War, then revolution, then civil war. And 10 years later, local authorities were deciding what to build there, a kindergarten or something else. And official version, which is probably on Wikipedia, is that a young and promising architect, Konstantin Melnikov, here is him at that time. He was like 37 years old. Applied for the land, applied for very unusual project. He brought to this committee meeting a very simple maquette of 2 cylinders. So it's, of course, it's not Melnikov who invented cylinders in our world, but the idea was not about cylinders as themselves, but about interaction of cylinders, interplay of cylinders. So this view from the above, you have the idea that it is more or less intersects for 1/3 of their volume. So it's like 2 wedding rings. But you can use them as models. You can use actually any number of these cylinders. So, and here, for examples of sketch projects by Melnikov, of chains made of cylinders, 5 cylinders, or multifoil, or he also proposed like snakes, etc., etc. It was presented as a prototype, as a model 1-to-1 of future social housing. 1920s in Russia, housing crisis, many people coming from countryside to the capital, industrialization, housing, well, shortage of housing. And yeah, it was on the agenda. This, not only in Russia, probably around Europe, look, Bauhaus, many other countries, the problem of rather cheap, not expensive social housing, yes, it was on the agenda. And it was presented in this way. But now, what we learned from, first of all, from the diaries of Melnikov, which we discovered and decoded, deciphered, is that it was just, let's say, just a camouflage, a cover. It was recommended by his connections, but his patrons in Moscow City Council to present it like this, in a socially and politically acceptable way at that time. But in fact, it was a dream of Melnikov of family home. And now we are coming to a family story. So there was a family of 4, Konstantin, Anna, and 2 kids, a boy and a girl, Mila and Vitya. And here is this nice couple, and this is Konstantin in almost military uniform, but don't be fooled, this is architecture, Imperial School of Architecture student before revolution. So he got his education first as a painter and then as an architect in Moscow School of Art and Architecture. And he was a, we can call, old school guy. All his background, all his education, it was before revolution. And all his career was after. And here, the same couple, but maybe 30 years later, Anna in the living room and Konstantin in his studio. And yes, you may guess that he was a painter as well. And Vitya and Mila, Victor and Ludmila, so it's more or less the kids in the age where the house was built. And last, maybe the last picture of a family album of two families, family of Anna. So this nice lady is Anna, and very well rich citizens, relatively rich, and rather poor farmer family of Constantine, this boy near the cow. So this boy has no chances in his life for a future, but he got to, let's say, to lucky ticket, to winning tickets. His talent to the drawing was noticed by a rich man, businessman, inventor, engineer. He was serving as a courier, delivering milk to the Moscow from village to Moscow. And actually, this guy, Vladimir Chaplin, he paid for his education. He became like a second father for Melnikov. And then second chance was after revolution, when social lift of revolution brought Melnikov to the top of architecture career. So why I'm so sure about his dream about family home? We discovered these drawings of early drawings, much earlier, so the house in 27, 29, so it's from early 20s, of prototypes of his dream about family home, first as, almost quadrant, octagonal form, then more egg shape, and they are it's quadrant, but they're unusual, a sort of spiral here, you can see. But these both versions, it has an important deficiency. You see in the center of ground floor plan here and here, you can see the heater, important in Russian climate. Not here, probably. But if it is right in the center of the ground floor, you became dependent on it. Life around the heater, it's not really free plan. And we will see how he overcame this situation in his plan for the house later. I should touch briefly two stories, which were a couple of years before the story with the house on Kryovo-Arbatsky. The first one is involvement of Melnikov in designing Paris pavilion. Soviet pavilion, exhibition pavilion for Universal Exposition in Paris. And it was very low budget structure, almost a kiosk made of wood, glass, and it was done in really short period of time. So Melnikov learned here how to deal with simple materials and how to reach a lot in terms of architecture, in terms of spaces, using very simple and low budget building materials. And actually this pavilion was one of sensation of this exposition. Melnikov spent almost a year there. Here is him in this top hat, which is still meanwhile in the house. It was too bourgeois to wear it in Soviet Union, so it's in a perfect shape till now. And you can see him in the circle supervising assembling of pavilion by a team of French carpenters. So it was important year for him. He became famous, as I said. He made a good connections with other architects, with Corbusier, with Auguste Perret, with Rob Mallet-Stevens. But we think that the idea of this house came to his mind in Paris, of a house more than just a family home, more than just a house as a manifest, a house as a statement, a house as a message to the city, if you'd like. Because if you're an architect, starting with capital letter A, you have to build something like this. Another project, less known but maybe more politically important for survival of Melnikov, was his involvement in super secret project to keep forever the body of Lenin in Moscow. And, you know, we still have this strange ziggurat on the Red Square, keeping the body under the glass cover, under vitrine. Yeah? And it was not Melnikov who designed the building itself, but he was responsible for sarcophagus, for glass cover. And so it was 5 months' work under close eye of special security services. It was a commission without right for a mistake. And he did it brilliantly. We think that now that, at least it's one of hypotheses, that the land, and it's a small piece of land, but right in the downtown of Moscow, it's like 1/5 of acre, was given to him as sort of as a compensation for his services, for his 2 important jobs for Soviet government. So he had a good, good patrons, good protection in the top of Bolshevik elite. These people, they all, you know, they all disappeared 10, 20 years later during Stalin purges. It was intellectuals, you know, very naive people, idealists, trying to build utopia. But these people, they helped Melnikov to got land for this experiment. So the whole story of family home was presented as an experiment on his family. Ongoing experiment, years and years, decades and decades. So de facto, it was not private at that time. It was given for experiment. Sorry. So, and maybe you noticed during the movie, but here is the picture, and you see the inscription above the street facade, which is the name and profession, Konstantin Melnikov, architect. And I saw the similar inscription in only one place in the world, in the city of Chicago, and this is Frank Lloyd Wright, architect. And it's also house and studio. But for Wright, it was definitely because of business reasons, because there was a presentation room, he accepted clients there, etc. For Melnikov, his main client was Soviet state and Soviet trade unions under control of the state. So no need to promote for business in this way. It's definitely not a business reason. In his life, Melnikov was a very modest person. He was never arrogant, and so it's not a sign of arrogance or sort of supremacy. No way. Even it was it can be understood in different ways. For us, it's really a statement, a message to the city. I'm an architect. I live here. That's it. And as you may see on the right, there are different versions of this facade with a lot of glass on it, but in all versions, you see, important thing, this inscription, you may find this place. So for him, it was really, really, really important. What to say? It was a big mistake. It was like a time bomb. But it's a sign that this guy, he knew the price for himself. You know, he estimated himself rather. No problem with self-esteem, right? But it was a big mistake at that time in the 20s. Let's read again. It's not name of Lenin or Stalin. It's name of Melnikov. So he didn't understand the reality around him. So 10 years later, he was out of profession. Basically, it was forbidden for him to work as an architect, and he became like in exile in this house. So it was a dream. He reached his dream. There were a lot of difficulties. We will talk about him later. But he reached it. He paid for this. He paid with money. But also he paid with his career and with his life. So he was never sent to Gulag or to prison. No. It was a place of his exile. Nobody took over this house. But then there were like 3 decades, from 38 till mid of 60s, of surviving. In the age of 48, he, from the top of 10 top of Soviet architects, he became 0, nothing. And it was really difficult time, years and decades. And again, this house became like a curse for him. You may think about this house as about two cylinders, as about pure form, but I give you a few examples of other Melnikov's project, and you may see that he was a real master of form. Form for him was the essence of architecture, not function, form first. Unlike, for example, his colleagues and, let's say, opponents, constructivists at the same period in Russia. So he worked with very interesting and unusual at that time for architects form, like triangle, you see triangle for office building, or cigar shape, or again triangle and fan shape, this flower type, flower tower, and this anthropomorphic plan for workers' club, to kinetic architecture building for newspaper office with rotating floors, manually rotating, and his version of Columbus Monument is Santo Domingo, rotating as well, because of nature forces, wind and water, and parallelogram for bus garage. So for him, architecture was really an art. And he was an artist in his heart first. He was a philosopher. Architecture was just expression of his different type of his ideas. Philosophical, artistic, yes. So it is, we think about him not as an architect in a narrow sense, about much broader story. But you can imagine these two towers of two cylinders anywhere as a form, in the desert, here, on the coast, in the forest. So it's a pure generic form. But on the other side, he had a very strict task to put it, particular task to put it in a particular plot of land, which is rather deep from the street, narrow, in between other buildings. So he was trying to move. These cylinders from the street to find a proper optimal location in terms of light, in terms of sunlight, but also in terms of views. Views for him were very important. What was Moscow at that time? Moscow was a big city, but big provincial city. It became capital only recently, because before 200 years before that, it was St. Petersburg. After Peter the Great, it was really a capital of Russia. And only recently, Bolsheviks moved it to Moscow. So, but it was still big provincial city with main urban dominance, churches. It was a city of churches. And for this house, important thing is that it had three, this is the back facade with famous hexagon at that time, and from this tower, you have view to basically to three churches to the north, which is here. This church is still there, meanwhile near the residence of US ambassador. And Savior on Sands, famous Russian church. This church to the west, it was demolished a few years later by Stalin. And last but not least, to the east, this bell tower, it's in the Kremlin. So it was a view to the Kremlin, not to the walls, but to the bell tower. So three nice views, three important views for Melnikov. As I told you, he was an old school guy, and he was a real believer. His sincere faith, sincere belief, this is a thing which helped him to survive, spiritually to survive, to keep his individuality during these hard decades of his life. That's what he knew from his diaries. And so these three views were more than just urban dominance, more than just nice views. It's something inspiring for him. And if you compare it with nowadays situation, and that's our analysis we done, with these dark blue buildings, and these dark blue buildings, and it's all blocked now. All views disappeared. So it's a very big issue for future nomination for inscription to UNESCO World Heritage List, because basically we have conservation project for the house, for the garden, but views, this is something you cannot, something really important for Melnikov, but really lost, and it's almost impossible to believe that we bring it back. So when you come into the ground floor, well, 5 years ago I was first time there. I saw thousands of pictures before I studied the house, years and years by books, but believe me, it was one of the biggest disappointments in my life, because when you enter there, looking outside at this minimalist form, you intuitively expect inside something Bauhaus type, minimalist, modernist, anyway. But what you see is very traditional, mostly pre-revolutionary furniture, petit bourgeois, yes. And yeah, this is a part of a story, a part of a truth. One of the leg of Melnikov there in the previous epoch. Another leg probably never fit in 21st century. So he was a man of contradiction, and this house, a house of controversies. And on the important place in the house, in the corner, you can see a keyboard and a case for icons, icons, religious icons for from his wedding ceremony in the church, and so it was really, really important. You can say what's about it, but believe me, in the 20s, to put on a visible place in your house, to put icons were a big gesture, big step. At that time, basically it was atheist state, fighting with the church, demolishing churches, so Melnikov was always open, always sincere. And it's strange that he got commissions for these important, politically, let's say, politically important commissions from the government, but at the same time, this. So in his heart, in his soul, he was never a Soviet person. He was never also anti-Soviet, no dissident, never. But he was absolutely non-Soviet. And this house for us, like a symbol of, if you'd like, silent resistance to the regime. He was living there, he was keeping privacy, keeping individuality. It is in the heart of Moscow, in the center of capital of communist country, but the life there is different. It's like a microcosm. It's like a small world created by Melnikov and supported by him during decades, him and his son Victor. And Melnikov used a metaphor in his diaries, a metaphor of a mysterious island by Jules Verne, L'île mystérieuse, just a few meters till next buildings. But they are there and we are here. It's like an island of individuality, of a privacy. And I should should name a title of important book on Melnikov, maybe the best book, the first book on Melnikov, and the best book, written not by Russian, by American, by Fred Starr. It was done in the 70s and it was printed in Princeton. Now it's rarity. You may find it on Amazon. I really recommend if the story touched you. So the title of the book, Konstantin Melnikov, a solo architect in a mass society. It's exactly to the point. He was always a solo. He was always not like others. So, about controversies. We talked about, don't worry, it's the only slide with the words. The rest is pictures. Yeah. So, we talked about religion and some traditional interior objects. But I should say that generally the building material used, and this is about bricks, stucco, about wood, and building technique, building culture, it's very traditional. It's like other buildings of 19th century. It's nothing avant-garde about it. And it is really low tech, no mechanisms, no automatic systems, etc. Even this house was with all comfort of, let's say, civilization from very beginning, from electricity, sewage, and supply of gas, etc., etc. But at the same time, So it's, in many senses, it's very traditional house, and when we learned this, we were a little bit shy, a little bit disappointed. So it's not a real avant-garde. But in fact, in terms of architecture, in terms of spaces, not only in terms of unusual outside form, but in terms of plan, in terms of spaces, and in terms of this very low tech but very interesting structure, it's really modernist. It's experimental. This is true. This is avant-garde. This is really true. I will not talk a lot about color scheme. We are only doing research on this, but you may notice in the movie that he had a lot of experiment with colors. He was a colorist. He was a painter, right? For colors for him are important. Functionality, as I mentioned, form was priority of Melnikov, but functionality in many senses, it's also interesting story. And last but not least, this house has potential for changes, which I think it's very important for in the long term. I will give you one example of this. So about low-tech things, I give you two stories. This guy from MoMA, our guest, he is trying to experiment with very low-tech communication system, which is acoustic string phone. You can see two holes in the wall on the ground floor, and there are two lines, two frets, one going to the top, you see this pipe, the rest of it in the studio, so you can talk to the third level in this house, and the second line is going, this is the excavations made during our Getty-sponsored survey of the structures and networks. So this pipe from the house to the gate, semicircular gate on the street, this is another line to communicate, a sort of intercom, but very simple intercom. So it's just a pipe, like on the ships at that time. So no mechanism, no electricity there, but you can talk, and it's. We are always offering to our visitors to play with this. It's really well, in our life we all depend on smartphones, on electricity, but this will work anyway, yeah? In any situation. But another example, maybe more interesting, is a system of heating in this house, which is again, it probably invented in the ancient Rome, but used here in a very smart and interesting way. So you can see two pylons on the street facade, right? They are making like a picture for this frame for the glass picture of facade, but in fact these are columns of recirculation. So how it works? You see the grill on two grills here and here on the right, on the left. In the winter season, cold air goes from the street, as it's called, physics. It goes down to the basement. In the basement there is a special heater, calorifier, designed originally by Melnikov, so it's here. There, the air is prepared, is heated, and through the system of air ducts, vertical, horizontal, there are a few of them, again, it's physics, convection, it goes up to the first level, second, third level, to the studio. Basically, there is the effect of tower, so hot air goes up, then it's getting a little bit cooler and coming back through the main staircase, which serves like a back channel for this air. But also on the back of these pylons, in the rooms, there are grills. So it goes there for the second circle, then to the heater, third circle, fourth circle. So my point is it's rather energy-saving house. Results of last year's survey is more or less 20 to 80. What I mean, it's always 20% of fresh air coming in and 80% of this recirculated air. It's rather interesting and rather well-functioning system, and I should say self-sustainable. So you don't need to intervene a lot. And this is very organic system. This house reminds, during the heating season, it reminds a a living creature. It breathes, it inhales, exhales. It's really, you feel these flows of air inside. It is an old house, but there are no bad smells. It's really well ventilated. So this system actually is a combination of heating and ventilation, the same channels, right? So these are two examples about low-tech side of this house, and this is the street model we have in the garden, and you can see that there are rather low, the composition of a house, it's rather hierarchical, rather low ground floor, very much divided to small spaces. This is where, let's say, everyday life is going on. Dining room, kitchen, kids' rooms, what else? Storage, etc., toilet, bath. These two big rooms, studio and salon, they are similar by size, and Melnikov made a very quick decision about them. It's like a puzzle, yeah, installed into each other. But he was doing a lot of work about ground floor, trying to make it to reach maximum transparency. And if we compare the start of the story in 27 and what we have now after 29, you must see that there are many changes done during these 2 years of construction. And I should mention the word freedom, because Melnikov nobody was controlling him. He applied with this page with drawings to city authorities. They approved it, and that's it. And as he sponsored, he financed this construction from his own savings. Nobody was behind him. He was, I should say, 4-in-1. He was an architect, he was an investor, he was a future habitant, and he was an engineer, because he was trying to cut costs, to save money not only on materials but also on qualified on specialists. So he became an engineer. He was a good student in architecture school, so he has some engineering skills, and yeah, he changed a lot during these years. And as you see here in this version 27, we have no basement. And the heater is, like in these earlier sketches we saw, on the ground floor, and you are very much dependent on it. It's like in a very traditional Russian house, you're running around this heater, and not really optimal plan. No. And here you can see a sort of penthouse with 2 rooms for kids. That later he gave him this 2 rooms with blue and yellow triangles you saw in the movie, small, I should say, Harry Potter type rooms, and arranged terrace instead. And last but not least, there was no idea of these famous hexagonal windows. You can see through all 3 levels, there are 2 vitrage, 2 vertical windows on the west and on the east. So he changed a lot during these 2 years, and another word, important word, is improvisation, because he was doing it on site. So this is a picture, maybe a month later after they start work to dig, to excavate rings for foundations. So you can see these workers, Constantine and his son Victor, in the middle of this ring. And you can see the heap of bricks they found. So Melnikov have no idea that underground structures from that previous building, demolished by developers before First World War, still there. So he was really happy when they found out these bricks. Then they found out actually underground structures. So he immediately installed them into his project. He managed to hide the heater, because at the beginning he has no money to dig, to excavate, to build underground floor. And so he used them also as, you can see the results of our research. We trying to match plans of different years. And these 2 pink walls, these are from the previous building. Yes, so they made like 2 walls of his basement. He hid the heater, he unlocked the ground floor, he made a revolution. He really received the freedom. And it's just an example, but he did a lot, deepness of a foundation, different issues. So he was changing project. Well, it was like playing piano. You know, it was like a jazz in a sense. This is one of the versions of Melnikov House plan, which is and compare with what Frank Lloyd Wright done 20 years later for one of his Usonian houses, which is obvious idea to use circular form not only outside but also inside. So Melnikov was also try to arrange like a round table, like a semicircular wall inside, but later changed the idea. So this is just one of many versions of a ground floor plan he was trying to test. Yes. Meanwhile, they met once. I mean, Wright and Melnikov in 1933 in Trinale di Milano, where there was an exhibition of 12 maestros, 12 key architects of the time, and Wright, Corbusier, Gropius, Adolf Loos, many others, and the one from Soviet Union, Melnikov. But they met, but not in person. So last minute, Soviet authorities didn't allow Melnikov to go in person. So there was only exposition there, and the house was presented there. So I'm completely sure that Mr. Wright saw it. So this is the reference to the sources we used. That's very strange. Tirov calendar. Melnikov used it as not as a diary, but use it for daily records. It's very important. You can track the process of construction and all other things. And from there we learned that economic issue, financial issue was really important one. So at that time, from previous commission, Melnikov has in his pocket like 10,000 rubles, and with initial budget estimate almost 2 times more. So, well, no wonder that sooner or later he was run out of money. Construction site was frozen, literally frozen, I mean, because it was winter. And I think Muscovites, inhabitants of Moscow, locals, they were wondering what is going on here, because it was really unusual. Yes, but then he has no access to a credit, to cheap credit. So 2 years trying to work with authorities to access money. Eventually he managed, and eventually we got the house. So basically the house is a dream about family home, a talent of architect and lack of money. So if you mix these 3 components, you receive this unusual structure. So this is the same comparison, but section of 2 versions with vertical window. Yes, with no basement. Here is a basement, and here is penthouse for kids and no penthouse. So this is the same idea. With these hexagons, idea of them, of this hexagonal aperture, was from very beginning in his mind, but it was not idea of windows. Remember, it had to be a white tower with 2 vertical stripes on both sides. It was just idea to save money, to save bricks. So this is calculations of Melnikov. This is proportion that instead of 100 bricks, you use 57.5, so almost 2 times less, reaching the same structural effect, the same effect of stability, because weight is leaking around 1 aperture, 2 apertures, 3 apertures, and this round shape, it allows to distribute weight very equally. So he saved, I guess, more or less 10% of his budget estimate with this trick. So for him, it was purely economic idea behind it, purely idea of to cut costs. And look at the facade and look at this structure during works. And this is this image, a thermal image done during winter. You may see, I don't know, you may see these invisible apertures locked. So not all of them used as a windows. More or less a half used as a windows, others are locked, and the color is different. So this scale on the right, the more green and more blue, that means better it keeps heat. So this, this red, this means glass, and most leakages of heat are here. And actually that means that these locked apertures, they keep heat better than bricks around it. Why so? Because very simple. We checked, well, not we, our specialist checked what is inside, and it's very sandy material. It's like an sandglass. It's very material, yes, with a lot of air in between particles. And air is the best insulator. So basically it's a mix of sand, clay, some rubbish from construction site. So these materials costs almost zero comparing with bricks. And it serves very good as insulator. So this was the idea behind it. We don't know exactly at what moment the idea about hexagonal windows came to his mind, but for us now, and for many of our visitors, and I hope for you, it's a very, let's say, very catchy image. Even if you don't like this facade, but believe me, you saw it, you never forget it. It's already in your mind. It's imprinted. It's what Melnikov were dreaming about influence of architecture on psychology, imprinting of architecture images in our minds. So this was one of his ideas. So this is already in November 27. Idea of these hexagonal windows came to his mind, and this is what is in between floors. Intermediate floors are these simple wooden membranes with, well, it's 1 inch thickness, 8 inch high, and with small step, it's a sort of pancake, yes? It's like 9 meters, I don't know, 9 meters, what it is, 30 feet length in diameter, and no supports, no beams. This is a sort of magic, how it's, but it's very reliable and very cheap structure. Cheap, not non-expensive. Again, economic factors were really important behind his ideas. This is the example in the 50s. Example that this is really, you have a really free plan, because only outer walls, these rings, does matter in terms of in structural sense. Basically, inside all these wall screens, they structurally doesn't matter. You can took them away easily. So when his son got married and there were a family of 4 with two kids, Melnikov redesigned ground floor, took away a couple of walls and erected another wall. So it really was easy for him to adapt the house for the needs of the family. And also the idea of living windows. What I mean that you can, if you don't need in future, you can easily lock this window, and you can uneasily unlock this invisible aperture and use it as a windows. Basically, because this feeling is, again, structurally doesn't matter. Yes? So I found it as a very important and very, well, very important feature of this house, that it has potential for changes. As you notice, there are a few types of windows, different fenestration. In our climate, double glazing is important, yes, but different types of double glazing. You see on the ground floor, they're like crisscross with diagonal frames. On the top in the studio, they're parallel. Different, well, they're similar in design, but completely different in functionality. So you can open this window, but really theoretically. What I mean that upper part is movable, but they moved towards each other. I mean, external goes in, internal goes out, they meet in between frame. It's for the ground floor. Why so complicated? We have no clear answer. Very simple version, against strawberry, against fifths. So it's much easier just to break this window rather than to open it. So On the top, in the studio, both frames goes in. So you take one, you take second one. Very easy, very handy, and no problem with this. And in the bedroom, it's rectangular form. It is really with hardware because these parts they are without hardware. They are, yeah. And this is example how in the kitchen how to use this window. Actually, not a window. It's like a sort of natural fridge, yes, as a cold pantry, yes. How to use this for our purposes. Different idea of light in different spaces. So in the living room and salon, it's obviously a giant window, large window. It's like let's say 16 to 13 feet. So I try to convert meters in feet. And but this is very direct light, very straightforward. In the studio, the story is completely different. You are buzzing in this light. You have a lot of light, but it's much more indirect. It's much more soft, if you'd like. This is another story about the only octagonal window is here. So from my previous explanation, you may guess that this wall consists of these structural apertures locked. So this was locked as well, but last moment Melnikov unlocked it, and we know why so, because this is normal window which could be opened, yes, but this is just for beauty because it is west, it is a sunset light, so you see this intervention of light on the pink carpet brought from Paris in 25, Art Nouveau carpet. It's very nice intervention, and more than that, it was a view to the church, which, as we remember, important for Melnikov, and even he didn't use in this case a diagonal frame. Why? Because it will cross the church, not nice. So he used this vertical plank to divide the picture in two parts, bell tower and the rest. And well, for this reason, he installed this. He cut two corners to install this T-type crossing. So that's why it's not 6 angles; it's 8 angles, and it's actually what we discovered during again this pre-conservation survey, that it was not white, as you see. For many decades it was white, it painted white, but originally it was brown, in a sense like a frame for the picture, because it is a picture. In terms of window design, it's not the best one because it has its own limitations, so you cannot open it again properly till the end. But for Melnikov, it doesn't matter. He's an artist in his heart, and for him, this view is much more important than functionality. Functionality is here in this window. This is for the light, this is for the view. So this is different types of window we have, and you can see that really the walls are outer walls. They are really thick. It's like 70 centimeters. That means 2.5 feet of thickness. Yeah. So you feel inside a little bit like in a church, like in a tower, but at the same time there is effect of pavilion. So effect of light, again, controversies, right? And from here in the living room, staying back to the main window, you can see the idea of Melnikov of cylinders talking to each other in architectural language. So you can see one cylinder, second cylinder, the third cylinder. Yes, it's really, really, really important for him. So I mean that cylinders does matter not only outside for this form, but they play with each other inside as well. That's what I mean. And speaking about this big window, you can see that it is opened except the lower level of quadrats of glass. And in this case, you have effect of full integration in and out, and you are like on a grand terrace, like in a grand loggia in a sense. So, but meanwhile, that space, sorry for if you look at this big window, it has many references, not only because of carpet, but also because of this big glass window, to the previous epoch, to the epoch of Art Nouveau, to the epoch, we call it in Russia, Russian modern, Jugendstil, all this type of art movement. It's really this room, it has a lot of references to the previous epoch. Room next to it, which is a bedroom, is much more radical space. Actually, it's not a bedroom in a regular sense. It's not a private bedroom. It is a laboratory for sleep. Laboratory for sleep. So you can see now here, this is how it looks like now. Yeah? You can see a lot of old antique objects. And it's all appeared here after the war, so try to imagine that it was completely different. I show you the pictures. Yes, it was really purist bedroom, pure of things, except, you see, except blankets, mattresses, and pillows. Nothing is there, no furniture, no hooks, nothing to have to disturb you from the sleep. It is like a capsule. Right? It's never-ending interior. It's total interior. It's painted the same color from the top to the bottom. I mean ceiling, floor, beds. They are actually not beds. They are podiums, pedestals, a sort of platforms. They are installed. They are part of interior. They are not movable. Look, normally, bedroom is not a. We are completely run out of time, but. Still a few slides, if you don't mind. Okay, good. So normally, bedroom is not a place which you show to the guests. Normally, it's something private, right? But not for Melnikov. As we have visitors' book from the very beginning of this house, we know that people have wrote something pro and contra, and probably the first American who visited this place, he wrote something about exciting house, experimental new lifestyle, blah, blah, blah. But he wrote bedroom is not up to our American standards because it lacks possibilities for furnishing. He didn't get the idea that he came to the laboratory for sleep. You can consider it as a spaceship. You come there and you sleep and you fly millions of years somewhere to the space. What are the sources of inspiration for this strange bedroom, for this strange experiment on his own family? So please remember that the whole family, parents and kids, were sleeping there together. And only these wall screens, from very beginning, they were visually separating kids and parents' platforms. Yes, actually, you cannot approach the bed. You have a little bit to jump on it, right? Yeah. So we have very realistic study paintings by Victor, his son, who became a painter in his life later, and it's a good source of information for us. So you see that the color was the same, and it's normally described as golden copper, something like this. And for Melnikov, there was a special theory of sleep in his mind. I don't think that there was really scientific theory. It was a mix of science and some mystical religious things in his mind. Briefly speaking, he was thinking about sleep as a real important source for rebirth. So every day we are getting tired, every day we are getting older. Every night we are not only restoring our forces, but we are getting younger. It's a process of rejuvenation, right? Correct word? Right? During night. So sleep is really, really important in our life. So there was a Russian religious mystic and philosopher, Nicholas Fedorov, And Melnikov was one of these Fedorovians, followers of Fedorov. I mentioned spaceship, not. It's important to mention space and spaceship because another Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, a grandfather of Russian space program, was also Fedorovian. So there was something about space, something about, you know, flying somewhere and living forever. Because at that time, among elite, among Bolshevik elite as well, the ideas of immortality were in the air. So people were really thinking that science and technical progress are really getting us closer to the eternal life, to the immortality. So this is a mix of these two types of ideas and a very strange experiment on the family. I should say that this house was damaged seriously during Second World War. There were a lot of many bombings of Moscow, and one of the first one in July 41. So Nazi invaded in June 41. In July 41, a theater not far from Melnikov House, maybe 200 meters, were destroyed by bomb, and shockwave from the bomb demolished the windows on the north facade. These windows. So this house was not heated during several winters of the war. As you understand, the system of heating I was trying to describe, it's organic. So you cannot heat one arm or one leg, you heat the whole body, yes? And in this situation, it was impossible to use it, well, because of the war, yeah. So Melnikov designed here and there local calorifiers, and so this interior was damaged, and after the war, nothing came back, so the war was like a borderline. After that, his kids grew up, got married, and etc. And the bedroom became what you saw. It became a private room of his wife Anna, according to her taste, with objects, etc., etc. But still, for us, it's a big mystery. It's a big mystery not only about structures and feelings, but also about colors. Because what you see, it's now on the surface, it's not really successful attempt of conservators in the 90s partially to reproduce the colors. And as you may see, there is nothing on the floor. So we are wondering what was on the floor, because the same color, but not necessarily the same material. So, and we are on the top of the house in the studio. So it's ground floor, kids, wife, somewhere Soviet authorities, right? Second level, laboratory for sleep, and, well, salon, yes. And top of the top in this house is studio. So idea of supremacy of architect over the world, right? And here you can see the balcony, a sort of mezzanine, internal balcony, which is top of the top, right? And small do-it-yourself table made by Melnikov, maybe next year after they moved in. So it was his preferred place, favorite place. He was sitting there using small sketchbooks for wording, for sketching, enjoying view to the church, really to be inspired. Down there were big tables for drawings, right? But this was really an inspirational place for him. And yes, we know from his sketchbook view of the church, probably through these windows, what we lost now. It's what is fantastic about it? You have no problem with direct light. You're above in this light. You have basically 360 degrees of light during the whole day. Even in the shadow day, in day without sun, it's okay. It's really enough light there to work there. This house has rather difficult history after the war. So the family was living there, but rather poor family, yes, as Melnikov was out of profession. After his death in the 70s, and a couple of years later, his wife Anna passed away. Victor continued to live there, his son. He became like a keeper of this house. He continued to work as a painter of in this house, and we are following actually to his testament to establish a museum. So it was in a really bad situation in the 70s. You see the losses of plaster layers, etc. In the 80s, it was finally accepted as as a regional landmark. And first ideas of the museum of conservation came to minds of officials. But in the 90s, there was a big boom of this development around it. So you can see here the guy in a hard hat, right? So it's a rather deep underground parkings, I should say, to level under it. So around this fragile structure made of wood. Yes, it's really fragile object. It was under threat, definitely under threat. Fortunately, well, it survived. It is, as results of last year's survey showed, outer structure and underground parts, they are in a good condition, in sound condition. There are many issues about these wooden membranes, about plaster layers, and about colors. But it's all a matter of future conservation project, and we are successfully past first stage, thanks to Getty and many other sponsors, and we are looking to the future with optimism. Well, what should I say? I should say that the garden is also important, and we are trying to reconstruct it according to the photographs. So you can see the Ipomea behind, Morning Glory behind of Melnikov. We are trying to reconstruct the vegetable garden, which was at the backyard, and important sources are also paintings from there. So it's like open part of a museum. So it's not easy to only advanced reservation to visit the house, but you can visit the garden and to be really close to it, free and every day. So I really invite you to experience this place, this site. It's really magical and mysterious. It's really full of energy, full of memories, and well, I hope we will save it, and sooner or later it will be in a UNESCO World Heritage List, and it will be saved for humanity. Thank you.